The FNAF 2 movie is coming out soon, so you know what that means. Sponsorships and brand deals. With that being said, we will be focusing on one in particular, the Popeyes meal, which actually got many people sick. This leads me to what we will be analyzing today. Could the man behind the slaughter get sick? Could Springtrap survive COVID? Now of course, the meal didn't give anybody COVID, but I thought this was overall a more interesting idea because I think Springtrap definitely beats common food poisoning, so I decided to make it a little more challenging. We will be analyzing what toll COVID would take on Springtrap and if he would actually be able to survive it. I know a few of you are thinking he's immortal, but let me explain in a long-winded analysis how close of a draw this is. The first thing we will be looking at is Springtrap himself, or what he is composed of. Springtrap is basically just a middle-aged man trapped inside of a bunny suit, whom we all know as William Afton. Now, COVID took out many middle-aged men, but this middle-aged man is different. He is technically immortal. See, for all you casual FNAF fans out there, you disgust me. The animatronic suits are built with a special metal, this being called remnant. This is often referred to as the haunted metal. Anything made out of this metal becomes a vessel for souls. In this instance, we can see Spring Bonnie acting as a vessel for William Afton, who got spring-locked into the suit. Now that we know a little bit more about Springtrap, let's move on to the coronavirus. I know a lot about this virus because I was one of the lucky individuals that lived through it. Coronavirus was a very dangerous disease that caused most of the world to shut down in 2020. This disease had various symptoms, which included fever, loss of taste, loss of smell, body aches, and fatigue. While there were shots created to dull these symptoms and get rid of them altogether, they weren't widespread enough to get to someone who was trapped in a back room for 30 years. While some could argue that William being stuck alone for this amount of time would have been beneficial in avoiding the virus, we do have a very plausible way that he could have gotten it. The Night Guard. Remember, FNAF 3 takes place in 2023, which means the pandemic would be around its conclusion. Now that we know how Springtrap could have contracted COVID, let's look into how it could affect him. For starters, we already know that he is physically immortal. Even though every movement he makes brings him excruciating pain, we can figure out that he is not exactly immune to illnesses. Since he is technically dead, he does not have a functioning immune system, which means the virus would not be fought off in any capacity, meaning his movements would become more fatigued, he would lose the rest of his senses, and he would be worse off than he already was. With this in mind, we could see a mental toll, making his "I always come back" attitude become a "please just let me die" attitude. With this being said, if he began to think like this, could his soul actually move on? This information can actually be found in a book called The Autobiography of a Yogi, which states, "Man is a soul and has a body." Not only does this determine that William does have a soul even after his murders, but also that his soul is not confined to his body, meaning at any time he could technically move on to the afterlife. The only reason he hasn't is for revenge or for hatred. You may be asking, why would I bring up this random book that has no relation to FNAF? Well, that's because it is actually in FNAF, specifically during Phone Guy's last moments, where you can hear a read aloud version of the book altered to the point of misunderstanding. This is actually where the tagline, "The Joy of Creation," comes from, even though it was misunderstood. The original line was, "The Joy of Creative Services." Now we can actually see Afton go to the afterlife in Ultimate Custom Night, which is canon. This is actually William Afton's hell, which is forever fighting off his creations. So in other words, this is where he would go after his fight with COVID. Of course, that's if he catches it, which we briefly discussed how he could catch it, but we didn't go over everything. The main thing being his suit, which could act as a big shield preventing COVID. See, we can look at Springtrap's design and determine if the gaps in his suit are actually enough to contract the virus. The main holes we will be looking at are right under his right eye, or the animatronic's mouth. He also has several holes in his main torso, exposing some vital organs, which could become a huge problem when dealing with an airborne sickness. But the main thing we should be looking at is how close the virus would be to him. We know Springtrap was actually found on night 2 of the location being open, so we know people had to have been around him. But at the same time, we can assume that they weren't actually that close to him on account of them not recognizing there's a decaying person inside. The main instance where we can actually see him being around another person is us, the player, or Michael Afton, which is when he jump scares us. See, we can easily determine that this is less than 6 feet on account of him having to physically touch us. In other words, all William Afton would have to do is be a nice, loving father. And I'm sure that can't be that difficult.
I hate you. I've always hated you. I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to make it hurt.
Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.